Our final presenter this morning is Don Holsinger. Don comes to us originally from Boise, Idaho. He served as a young missionary in Brazil during a period of rapid church growth and membership there. He joined the College of Religion briefly for 1 year in 1965-66, teaching the introductory course in church history. He went on to the University of Wisconsin, where he was the LDS Institute director and where he received 2 master's degrees. From there, Don completed his PhD in sociology at Stanford University and taught at the Palo Alto Institute. Don has held academic appointments at the University of Chicago, the University of Arizona, and the State University of New York at Albany, all in the sociology of education. From 1985 to 1995, Don worked for the World Bank in Washington, D.C. and in Ethiopia. In 1995, Don came to BYU as the director of the Kennedy Center and professor of international development studies. From 2010 to 2012, Don and his wife Ellen served as government relations representatives for the church in Geneva, Switzerland, working on the protection and promotion of religious freedom. And Don's presentation is The Dividends of Religious Freedom.
Good morning to all. My presentation this morning is a shortened version of a paper that I presented in Stockholm, Sweden at last year's annual meeting of the European Association for the Study of Religion. For the professional historians here, and there are many, I am grateful for your allowing a sociologist in your midst. It's wonderful to be with you, and especially Dr. Cowan, who saved me from a career in Vietnam by facilitating an appointment in the teaching of church history at BYU. He probably doesn't remember that, but that's a long time ago, and I was grateful to have that. We are typically impatient for the bottom line, so here it is. After a great deal of work over several years, I reached the conclusion that the level of religious freedom of a particular country is not related to how fast or slow our membership numbers grow. This is true of the 3 religions I studied: Latter-day Saints, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists. Membership growth rates have been declining for all 3 religions for nearly 30 years, and in some instances for 50 years. Membership growth, however, continues. I'll explain the difference between the rate of growth and simple growth. Now for the research story. The significance of thinking about growth rates as opposed to growth is quickly grasped in our own everyday experience of driving an automobile. We easily sense the difference between moving forward, standing still, or moving backward. The car's speedometer tells us something more: the rate of speed. Without the speedometer, we could only approximate how fast we are moving and whether we are accelerating, decelerating, or standing still. So it is that when we say the church membership is growing, we understand that there are more members of record this year overall or in a particular place than was true last year. But we don't know whether we are picking up speed or losing speed. To add meaning to a membership number, a good method is to compare growth rates at different points in time. In this way, we can know whether we are picking up speed, slowing down, or stopped. This research looks at membership growth rates over a long time period, 40 or 50 years, and does so country by country, as well as for the church as a whole. I compared 3 Christian religions: the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Seventh-day Adventists, and Jehovah's Witnesses. These well-known religions all have American origins and rely heavily on worldwide proselyting to spread their message, acquire new adherents, and establish themselves as recognized religious organizations for legal and tax purposes. The country-level data for Jehovah's Witnesses used in this paper come from their own yearly reports. Jehovah's Witnesses records are considered to be exceptionally precise and reliable. But the problem is that they don't report membership per se. They have lots of numbers reported annually and by country, but the one most researchers use is average monthly publishers. This would be akin to a ward or stake missionary who is in good standing and who performs publishing or witnessing or missionary activities monthly. This membership standard is very conservative, somewhat akin to Latter-day Saints who attend meetings regularly or who are active or who have current temple recommends. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has been active in the freedom of religion defense movement longer than any Christian religion in a formal organizational sense. Their membership data are comparatively easy to find by country and over many years. The Adventist Office of Archives and Statistics stands in contrast to the other two in terms of their openness and transparency. The Adventists are very democratic in organization. We relied principally on the Deseret Morning News Church Almanac for country-level LDS membership data for 1975 to 2010. Before 1975, there are a variety of historical sources, including the Almanac, that sometimes reported membership for early years. But the LDS data are not well organized and sometimes contradictory in early years. There are several individuals who have dedicated considerable effort to the collection and systematic organization of these LDS membership records, and some of them have internet websites that report country-level numbers. Freedom of religion or belief data are taken from the Association of Religion Data Archives, or ARDA, funded by the John Templeton Foundation. The ARDA data have come to be regarded as the most extensive and reliable source on the state of religious freedom in the countries of the world. Freedom of religion or belief measures are composite variables that include indicators both of government-imposed restrictions on religion and social or cultural hostilities toward religion. The LDS Church does not operate in quite as many countries as do the other two. The Jehovah's Witnesses sometimes operate outside normal legal recognition and therefore find it easier to establish themselves in country contexts where Mormons have not yet entered. In the last quinquennium, 2005 to 2010, LDS are almost in as many countries as the other two, but not necessarily in the same countries. In this table, I report growth rates for all three religions in 5-year periods, or quinquennia. The trend is easy to see, with the growth rate for Jehovah's Witnesses approaching zero, somewhat akin to a slowing vehicle almost at a stoplight. LDS growth rates that were at 24.1% 50 years ago have declined to about 4.3% in the quinquennium beginning in 2005. This figure shows the same trends, but in the form of a line graph. The growth rates for LDS are shown on the red line. The LDS growth rates show a brief upturn between 1970 and 1980, but a steady downward trend thereafter. The rate of decline is about the same for all three religions, although LDS rates are still a bit above the other two. You may be thinking that a single overall growth rate for an entire church obscures important regional or area variations. These data confirm what we have heard and experienced in recent decades, namely, that regional or area variations in membership growth are significant. Incidentally, the regions reported in this table are UN world religions and not LDS church areas. Takes a while to absorb all those numbers, sorry. You won't absorb them, you'll have to read this. Now to the main question. Does religious liberty affect growth rates? This table shows growth rates over 50 years controlling for the level of religious liberty. The column on the left contains growth rates for the LDS membership data in countries with low measured levels of religious liberty. The middle column refers to a middle range religious liberty countries, and the right-hand column for high religious liberty. If you look long enough, you will probably come to the conclusion that you don't observe a relationship between membership growth rates and religious liberty. I will illustrate this counterintuitive finding later in the form of correlations. When I produced this table for the first time, I immediately rushed to calculate the correlations. I found low, near zero coefficients, usually with negative signs. In other words, the LDS Church membership growth rates are slightly higher where there are lower levels of freedom of religion. I was initially perplexed. If you are perplexed, that is an understandable reaction. This line graph illustrates the same relationships. Each line represents the growth rate picture for the LDS Church, but separated into three groups corresponding to high, medium, and low levels of freedom of religion. If a high level of religious liberty was consistently associated with high membership growth rates, the green line would always be on top, which you see it's not. In this graph, we see church-wide growth rates in the blue line. The red line, which doesn't change much, is the measured freedom of religion as an average of all countries in which we were established in that time period. The measured levels of freedom of religion haven't changed much over the past half century. The green line, hovering at about zero, is the simple correlation coefficient between freedom of religion and membership growth rates at the end of each quinquennia. This figure shows the same relationship for Jehovah's Witnesses. Correlations are also very low and negative. And now again for the Seventh-day Adventists, about the same story. What's going on here? What is the best explanation for why all three religions have grown faster in places where there is relatively low religious liberty? What is it about places like Botswana, Angola, Cape Verde that might cause them to be at the top of the list of fast growth rates for the LDS Church? It quickly occurred to me that I have spent time working in all 10 of these countries. Why was I there? Because for 13 years I was employed by a large development organization as an education specialist. These 10 countries, with the LDS Church's highest growth rates, are all very poor countries with significant education problems. I turned to the Human Development Index, or HDI, for a key to the puzzling low and negative relationship between membership growth and religious liberty. The HDI is a good measure of human qualities or human capital of a nation. It is a sophisticated composite measure that has a number of interrelated dimensions of the quality of human life. Currently, Norway is at the top of the HDI index with a score of 0.96, and Niger is at the bottom with an HDI of 0.30. I knew that worldwide there was a negative relationship between a country's HDI rank and the importance a nation's citizens attach to religion. Was the HDI more important to church membership growth than freedom of religion? That was where I turned next. This table presents a selection of 25 countries in which the LDS Church is established. They are selected so that there is an even distribution of church membership growth rates from the very highest, Botswana, to the very lowest, Germany. In the far right-hand side column, you see the HDI for that country. I compared the average HDI for countries that were experiencing above average membership growth rates with the HDI for countries in which our membership growth was below average. The difference is very large. Here you see the simple bivariate correlations between the growth rates for the three religions and the HDI index. Focus on the fact that there is a minus sign or a negative sign in front of all of the correlations on this table. In other words, all three religions have grown faster in nations displaying low levels of human development. Simplifying still more, but not inaccurately, we have higher growth rates in poor countries than in rich ones. Countries can be ranked by how much they have improved on their Human Development Index score. I haven't done a full analysis of this, but for the quinquennium ending in 1980, when the LDS Church membership growth rates were quite high, I looked at the correlation between our growth rates and the HDI improvement rank now, of the countries in which we were established, all of them. I found the correlation for the LDS Church was small but positive, whereas for the other two churches, the HDI improvement rank in the countries in which they were working remained low and negative. Here's the question. Does the HDI cause LDS growth, or does LDS growth cause improvement in the HDI? I'm still working on the answer to that one. I return briefly now to something that I have learned by experience is not always well understood. The difference between growth and growth rates. Forgive me for the repetition, but the distinction is critical. I have selected Australia to illustrate the difference concretely. I have chosen to begin with Australian LDS membership numbers in 1975 and end in 2012. The horizontal axis shows a steady climb in membership numbers almost without interruption, except for the year 2000, when the reported numbers declined slightly. One might quite correctly interpret this graph by saying that the LDS membership in Australia has grown steadily since 1975. Here I present the actual numbers on which the previous graph is based. We see the membership picture from 1900 to 2012. Only from 2000 to 2001, as I've pointed out, is there a decline in the number of members. With one exception, this is a picture of steady growth. But the growth rate story is a little different and helpful, I believe, in analyzing the Australian case. In the early years when the number of members in Australia was very small, the average annual growth rate was huge, actually 57% between 1900 and 1940. Since then, the growth rate has declined. This is quite normal. Beginning in 1999, the number of stakes has not increased much at all in Australia, although the number of wards and branches has slightly increased. There are many reasons for this type of organizational growth, including that we may be having a hard time retaining activity levels among new converts in Australia. But that is not the main point I wish to make here. Growth and growth rates. Each tells a story. The addition of one new member in the current year, assuming no loss of members, will produce a positive growth. The rate of growth, however, is a different matter. As a car slows down to eventually stop at an intersection, it still moves forward, but decelerating until at last it stops. The growth graph is on the left and the growth rate on the right. The red line is the LDS Church average for the 50-year period. The blue line is the Australian 50-year average. The membership picture in Australia can be viewed either from the point of view of we are growing steadily in Australia, or the rate of growth in Australia indicates that the number of members there may have reached a terminal point. This is what I think I've discovered. Usually accepted freedom of religion measures show no relationship to membership growth rates. Freedom of religion, on the other hand, may often open the door for the LDS Church to enter a country, although it is less important for the other two religions. Average levels of freedom of religion do not change much and have not changed much, and we have good measures, between 1960 and 2010. The Human Development Index is highly correlated with membership growth rates for these three strict proselyting religions. That correlation is negative, meaning that growth rates are higher where human development is lower. It's a very strong correlation. This relationship is large. Positive membership growth has been quite steady for 50 years in the three religions operating in somewhat different countries, while membership growth rates have declined overall and for all three religions. Membership growth rates are highest in countries with small total membership, with low human development indices, and high poverty rates. Growth rates for all three religions are decelerating and approaching zero. When a person or a business or even a church succeeds at activities that appear to need more size, money, power, or influence than it may seem to possess, we may say that it punches above its weight. Its influence is disproportionate to its size. I believe that the LDS Church is currently punching well above its weight class, and that it will continue to do so, thus hastening the work of salvation. The LDS membership growth rate is at best described as deceleration. But we are growing in other ways, many of them. Consider world humanitarian and emergency assistance efforts, temple and genealogical work, among many other possible examples. Thank you for your attention and for your questions.